money on is security. There's no return on it, right? So, how robust is your security package? Is it something that you do train on? Do you train your employees? Are you creating that culture? Are you sharing best practices? Right? Groups like this, are you sharing best practices on the security side? This is a great way to do it, right? There's no investment. This is through meetings. You have folks here who've been through things. Are you having those conversations? Backups. Do you have effective backups for your networks? Are you housing that securely somewhere else in case you are subject to a ransomware attack? Can be absolutely essential. Familiarize yourself with your systems. I am not a technical person. I assume many of you probably aren't either. Do you have an understanding of how your systems work? Is that outsourced? That's something that you want to think about. All the activity going on in your network, is it logged? Are you logging the activity? The insider threat piece, right? If you don't know who's accessing your systems and when, how are you going to tell us who it was that compromised your system, right? Yes, sir.
We read stories about attacks on company systems that perhaps aren't identified at some point as they're occurring.
Yes.
Or there's a denial of service attack, which is very apparent. To what extent does the FBI become involved as a resource with a particular company that may be undergoing that sort of an attack?
So the gold standard for us is we have relationships with the victim companies so that when they see it, they will immediately call us. The very best day that we have is when we can proactively work a case. We work mostly historical cases in the white collar realm or the cyber realm, in that it happened, it's over, now they're calling us, right? But if there's an opportunity as it's happening to observe the exploitation, right? Or even better, if there's any part of it that's insider threat, any part of it that's social engineering or criminal enterprise, where we can maybe steer it out of your network and into ours and begin having, that's the best way to collect and drive evidence, is to proactively engage these folks, right? And we can, there's all sorts of tools at our disposal to either forensically access this stuff and then work it back proactively. The human element piece, engage them in an undercover capacity. If it's a ransomware attack and they contact you to pay a ransom to get access to your data, and you have effective backups, maybe we can slip in between that. You get backup online with your backups, and now we can engage them, right? And there are lots of ways through the transactional piece to identify where these folks are, right? And drive that back so we can start identifying folks. So sooner the better in every case. Large companies, we have something here in Richmond that we've stood up called the Cybersecurity Partnership. Capital One participates, Dominion Power, General Electric, Altria. So the big companies here locally engage real time with us. They share what they're seeing on their networks. They're getting just bombarded all the time. So what they're seeing, what the signatures are on the malware and that sort of thing, they're bringing that to us. We're able to then share that across the country with folks. Hey, watch out for this. Like, here's what we're seeing. Here's what the Chinese are up to now. Here's what the Russian hackers are doing with this exploit now. Watch out for this on your systems. So we're able to do that. That's a real-time information sharing there. Granted, those are the biggies. But to the extent small, medium-sized companies are experiencing that, the sooner the better.
You mentioned GE being part of the network that you are working with. They recently established a very robust center for their own cyber security here in Richmond.
Yep.
Did the FBI's work here in Richmond have any influence on their decision to choose Richmond?
Good question. Why did they choose Richmond? I don't know why they chose Richmond, to be honest with you. They must have had something here already that married up with it. I can tell you that Art Cummings, one of their principal overall, he may be the CSO. Forgive me if I have that wrong. Frank Figluzzi, who's their cybersecurity, national security side, and then Arnold Bell, who was one of the principals of that, localized. He's now a CSO for another company, but all former bureau. So, that's in sort of the post-retirement, bureau migration, right? That's where those folks, we folks, tend to find ourselves, is in those positions. And that doesn't speak to Richmond. I think maybe the proximity to DC. Obviously, GE is they're almost quasi-government in their national security significance for the country and things. So I think the proximity to Washington DC and things maybe had a role in it. But I'm just guessing. But questions, yes, sir.
Seth Newcastle with Wells Fargo. I read that Defense Secretary James Clapper had said there's a possibility of sort of a cyber Pearl Harbor scenario. I just wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
Sure. So are there countries that have the capability to knock out our SCADAs and other things here in the United States? I mean, I can't go too deeply into it because of the classified nature of that discussion, but yeah. Our director, make no mistake about it, counterterrorism is still our #1 mission, but that cyber threat is scoped within our agency as an emerging threat. It's probably dated language because the threat is very real. That's a tough conversation to have in a non-classified environment, but that is a huge issue. Huge issue.
So outside of cybersecurity, are we finishing up? I was just curious. I mean, we've heard things like, the real threat is our $18 trillion debt or climate change. Can you give me your thoughts on those things?
So I'm not a policymaker.
Sure.
I tend to sort of reside firmly here on planet Earth in terms of what I see, and cyber, very, very real. International terrorism, very, very real. Hostile foreign intelligence operations here, cross-pollinating sometimes with both of those threats, very, very real, very present. My guys on the current ISIS threat, no big secret, certainly been in the news lately that May was a big month in terms of what they wanted to achieve, and we've been all hands on deck recently with that. The Islamic State threat is here. When I say here, folks influenced here, folks radicalized, recruited by social media, present here in the United States. Oh yeah. And are they here in Virginia? Oh yeah. So that's real. Our director said every one of our 56 field offices has those cases, and Richmond's no different.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Given the multitude of threats, how are you changing your hiring practices, and what type of people are you bringing on? And do you care to discuss at all about the need for more?
Great question.
Can you repeat the question?
So who are we hiring into the current threat environment? So I'm a J. Edgar Hoover legacy leftover, typical recovering attorney. The attorneys and the accountants of the J. Edgar Hoover legacy, I think, are maybe a little out of style with the bureau. I don't know. We still hire them. Somebody's got to do the white collar work, I guess. But we are looking more at the systems engineers, the cyber expert folks. We're looking at language as a good sort of qualification feather in your cap for applicants. I'm seeing folks who are proficient, and I'm not talking Spanish, but folks who speak Arabic, Chinese, Mandarin, Russian. Pashto, Urdu, those types of languages. We're seeing a lot more agents come in with those skill sets. You know, the intelligence collection, strategic intelligence sensibilities. We're seeing folks come from the military, come from other agencies within the U.S. intelligence community to the Bureau. We're promoting a lot of our own analysts that have that same experience. So, yes, we're still hiring lawyers, accountants, and those types of folks, but you're starting to see a lot more hard science engineer types, particularly on cyber, and then folks with that language proficiency.
As kind of a follow-up to some of the priorities, I was a little bit surprised to hear that the child exploitation is a major priority for the FBI. Is it that bad of a problem that it needs to be?
So maybe I misstated it. It's not a major priority for the FBI, not that we don't care about it. We do work those cases.
Okay.
But just based on our own resources within our agency, the way I said agent officer strength are 1/4 the size of New York City Police Department. We're pretty well funded though. We have a sizable budget, over $8 billion. So what we try to do for threats like that are cross-jurisdictional, international in certain cases, we try and enable local agencies that are deep in that threat for their communities through task force credentialing and things, so they actually sort of receive the federal ability to go outside their local jurisdiction to work these cases. So we build those task forces. We have one here in Richmond, and it's staffed with local police detectives that do that work. We fund it, we pay their overtime, we get their cars and that sort of thing. But I don't provide the agents. The agents don't do that work.
Okay.
So, yes, sir.
You mentioned organized crime a few times. I mean, has the nature of organized crime changed and now morphs over all these areas you're talking about, or is
Yeah.
this less organized and more localized?
Sure. So the sort of traditional Italian organized crime, not the threat it once was. I think it's safe to say that. I won't make any news by saying that, I don't think. But Russian organized crime, very sophisticated, violent probably in their own countries and with the certain political dynamics there, but here just a lot more sophisticated in terms of cyber fraud, cyber threats, money laundering, international fraud, and that kind of thing. A lot of the cyber activity we see, the carding, the ransomware, that's organized crime in the sense that the racketeering type, you build your empire based on the fraudulent proceeds, right? And you employ people to commit fraud. So when we say organized crime, that's kind of what we're talking about. It's criminal enterprise, not just somebody working out of their own home, but really building a fraud business overseas to steal our money, if that makes sense. That's what it looks like these days. Yes, sir.
I had a friend that bought a ticket to, he was a big Kentucky fan, so he bought a ticket to the final game, which obviously Kentucky didn't make it to the final game.
Right.
So he turned around and was going to try to sell his ticket, and he was told that be very, very careful about selling that ticket because there's so much counterfeit money out there, especially around an event that is as big as that was.
Sure.
That you go back to StubHub and you take 50 cents on the dollar
Yeah.
and get your money back. But is there that much still with all the fancy colors and
The
everything else
currency. So that's, I'll pass the buck on that one. That's a Secret Service violation. That's not an FBI violation in terms of counterfeiting.
Okay.
You hear the legends about the super notes and all that kind of stuff. That might be a place where we plug in, but that's not my area of expertise. I think there's probably a lot more bad paper out there in terms of negotiable things than there is actual counterfeit currency. Certainly, credit cards built off of stolen identification, that kind of stuff. That's where we see a lot more of the threat. But that's a good question for the Secret Service. I'm not sure what they're saying about the counterfeit. Yes, sir.
Does the FBI either
by itself or in connection with other government agencies, ever engaged in any payback of some of these overseas groups that are doing bad things to us?
You mean like just forfeiting money and then paying victims type of thing, or?
Or know if, if a quasi-government is trying to mess up some of that stuff, do we ever turn around and say we too can play that game?
So take the fight to the enemy kind of thing?
Yes, sir.
We're not committing any fraud against them, so we're not sort of doing the turnabout thing. But in terms of working cases back, swimming upstream to identify folks, and then mitigate them in their own countries, yeah, absolutely. So for us, it's sort of an intelligence building process as opposed to sort of a military style retaliatory process. We want to collect the evidence, deliver it to the host country, work in partnership with them to put these guys in the gulag for a while.
But if the host country is part of the bad guys, do you ever play offense?
That's probably a better classified environment conversation. We are limited in terms of what we can do. I'll probably just have to leave it there. But but there are other agencies that we do work in partnership with that are more offensive in their mission. So,
We probably have time for maybe one more question.
yes, sir.
So in the case of, say, ransomware, where a company in the United States being held ransom for getting their data back, they're going to send money from their bank, I'm assuming, to maybe an overseas bank or something. At what point do you lose track of the money trail in those situations?
It depends on the country, but the reality is, anytime there's an electronic transacting, we're not talking hawalas in the Middle East or something, but we're actually talking, say Eastern Europe, where most of that stuff's coming from. We can track it. I don't think we ever really lose track of the money. If it becomes a Bitcoin situation where they're in a virtual currency and you'll lose track of it there. But we have correspondent relationships with the banks over there that end up moving the money, our domestic banks, and so we're able sometimes even to subpoena banks here for correspondent records and get that way without even going through the MLAT process and all of that. But if we're actually sending money by wire transfer and that sort of thing, and then paying, we can usually have quite a bit of luck doing that.
So what keeps you from getting to the end destination?
Not knowing about it until the money's gone and it's already picked up. That's usually if we know about it and we can sort of work in partnership with the institutions that are sending the money, and we have a lot of luck with those cases. But when it's paid and they say, you know what, I'm uneasy with that, or the lawyers come in and say, did you call the bureau? No, it's gone, and we've lost it at that point. What else? Was this useful?
Actually disturbing.
I'd like to thank Adam. I know we could sit here and talk for hours, all of us that are lenders and financial service companies that provide financing to people. The kryptonite to our business is fraud, and it's the bad guys. And so often, measuring character of the people that we do business with, there's so much in the way of qualitative judgments that it's a difficult sport to be in, and I know all of us in this room have been on the other side where we've had people do harm to our institutions, and it's probably the most important thing that we do. So this was just a fabulous presentation. We really enjoyed it, and let's give Adam a round of applause. Mark your calendars. September 17th will be the next VCF Presents. I want to thank everybody for coming out on this rainy day today.